5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to a beautifully lit up Formula One paddock here at Losail International Circuit in Qatar. And we are already getting organised and set up for qualifying. Yes, you heard me right. We've had one practice session, the only practice session of the weekend, and now it is straight into the fast stuff. Qualifying coming your way very shortly to set the grid for Sunday's Qatar Grand Prix, because of course this is a sprint weekend. So we're going to have a full sprint Saturday tomorrow, the sprint shootout setting the grid for the sprint race, but right here, right now, it's all about qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix, which, by the time we get to that, we may well have a 3-time world champion in Max Verstappen. He comes into this weekend on the brink of taking his 3rd title, and it could all happen during tomorrow's sprint race. But he has got to focus, along with the other 19 drivers, on the next 60 minutes to get the most out of his car. The Red Bull has been so dominant, hasn't it? And it does look like Max Verstappen will take his 3rd title tomorrow. I'm Rosanna Tennant down in the F1 paddock, which, as I said, is lit up beautifully. The sun has set here. It is still very warm, 32 degrees and 34 track temperature out there. A lot cooler than we saw in the practice session earlier on when we were out in sunlight. Now the sun has set, the lights have come on, and we are ready to see what this track is like when it gets that little bit cooler and to see what the drivers can do with it. In the commentary box, talking us through the next 60 minutes, is our lead commentator Harry Benjamin, alongside racing driver Alex Brundle and the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson. Harry, practice session was an interesting one. It was very, very busy. We knew it would be because they only have 1 hour, the teams and drivers, to get themselves ready for the rest of the weekend. But it was a difficult one to read, wasn't it? Because everyone was doing different things. There was a lot to cram in. What did you take away from, I'm not even going to call it FP1, I'm just calling it FP.
Yeah, the one and only FP that we get, and even that was at a push, wasn't it? It was an unrepresentative session, of course, in the daylight, and the first bit of track action that this Qatar circuit has seen completely resurfaced since the last time we were here, back in 2021. 16 turns, and every single one of them was tricky to negotiate for every single driver out there. So many running wide, the dust and the sand that was being picked up in plumes at one point, and of course the curbs, really something to watch out for here, as they have quite a steep serrated edge that can really hurt your floor if you run wide. Track limits, another thing being monitored quite closely as we come into this qualifying session, but of course difficult to get a read. But who ended up topping the session? Max Verstappen in front of the 2 Ferraris. But I tell you who was also looking quite good, Fernando Alonso, the wily old fox, and last time we were here managed to get onto the podium, his first podium for Alpine, and it was his first at the time in about 7 years. He's got something around this track, so you can never rule out Fernando Alonso, but I think particularly so here.
A lot of drivers to keep an eye on. And Alex, Harry's touched on the fact that we had drivers running wide. The conditions were difficult. It's extremely windy here in Qatar. Today we've had gusts of up to 60 kilometres an hour. Do you think the drivers were just pushing the limit so that they know what they can do during qualifying, or do you think it's going to still be a factor during these next 60 minutes?
I think the limits were quite low in that early FP session, given the nature of the circuit and how dusty it was. We saw a lot of drivers off through the exit of turn 10, a lot of drivers off for the exit of turn 15 as well. They'll be losing those laps if they do so during qualifying. It was a difficult session for everyone out there to get a handle on their cars and to get a feel for what they're going to do. And now they're going into one of the most critical sessions of the weekend, traditional Grand Prix qualifying with our little sprint recreation day in the middle. But we're going to Frogger straight over that one because we're qualifying today for the Grand Prix on Sunday. So they've got to get their heads around it extremely quickly here in very different conditions. Air temp some 10 degrees down from what it was earlier on. Track temp much lower as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. These sprint weekends bring so much to the sport. If you're a fan of it, great. If you're not, still lots to be entertained by. And Andrew Benson, of course, the cars went into Parc Fermé at the end of FP1. So what you've got is what you're stuck with. That's a tricky place to find oneself if it doesn't go your way this evening in qualifying.
Well, they've had a chance to make some changes after practice, Rosanna. They get to, it's Parc Fermé at the start of qualifying, technically, but I know what you mean. So anyone who was struggling, anyone who was struggling in pre-practice, has had a couple of hours to play around with the car and hope it's better. But of course, you are right, now they're stuck with it. They can change the front wing angle basically and the tyre pressure, front wing angle only actually, and that's about it. So and they've got a few things in the cockpit to play with, but it's going to be heading into the unknown. The track conditions are changing all the time, as Alex said. The temperatures come down, but there's also, it'll be cleaning up through this qualifying session. You would expect the form to be quite similar to the Japanese Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago. Obviously Red Bull at the front, unless something disastrous goes wrong for them. It's high-speed corners. McLaren are normally good in them. They had a low-key practice session, but I suspect they'll come good in this qualifying session now. And then what happens with Ferrari, Mercedes and Alonso behind in that mix as well, we're about to find out.
Absolutely. McLaren P9 and P10 in that practice session. Oscar Piastri ahead of his teammate Lando Norris, but fresh from a double podium in Suzuka. And as you say, Andrew, there are similarities here. So maybe McLaren will rise up through the ranks as we get this qualifying session underway. The cars are queuing up at the end of the pit lane. They are eager to get out and get our qualifying session underway. To set the grid, do not forget, for Sunday's Qatar Grand Prix. Harry, I'm going to hand it up to you in the commentary box.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. And the green light is well and truly on. 18 minutes and counting already as they all file out of their garages, and it's getting a bit tight between a couple of cars. The two Alpines having to tread very carefully as they right hand down it out of their garage, getting very close to the wall and each other, but they navigate the pit lane and manage to make it out equally. There's a party going down inside the Red Bull garage, flashing lights everywhere, and the lights are well and truly on here at this Losail circuit. Over 3,500 light bulbs suspended from 1,000 structures around this track, illuminates a space equal to 70 football pitches, and in this case it's 5.4 kilometers, 3.3 miles, 16 turns, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. Very different track conditions to what we had in free practice, and this, the opening gambit for qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix Q1, where we will eliminate the 5 slowest drivers, and Verstappen already straight out there. Alongside me is the sports car driver and esteemed racing driver and broadcaster Alex Brundle. And Alex, we are very much getting a different view of things, because in FP1 the plumes of dust and sand were being kicked up everywhere, but as Verstappen now makes his way around the track, it looks already like that sand and dust has been cleared, even though we haven't really had any track action in between FP1 and now.
Circuit looking considerably cleaner. It certainly is. Both Red Bulls were the first 2 cars across the line, and they're not kicking up those plumes of dust as we did see earlier. Andrew Benson sat next to me just pointing out that both the Mercedes cars have headed out into this first session of qualifying on the medium tyre. No obligation to run any specific tyre throughout the 3 stages of this traditional qualifying session. Of course, we will have the 2 mediums throughout sprint qualifying used in session 1, SQ1 as it's called, and SQ2 tomorrow, before they move on to the soft compound, I should say, for SQ3. But interesting that both of those Mercedes have taken that route in this early Q1 session. We'll see if they use the medium throughout. A subtly different tyre allocation, of course, available on these sprint weekends, with more medium tyres available, less soft tyres available. So it could be a play towards that on what is generally a 2-stop Grand Prix here.
What's also interesting, Alex, is that the timing screens at least are showing that the Red Bulls and the Ferraris have gone out on used softs for this first run. Now, the reason we're discussing this is that you haven't got enough soft tyres as a driver to do 2 runs in every one of the 3 sessions. You have to manage your tyres somehow. So Mercedes obviously choosing to manage those soft tyres by running mediums on this first run. Red Bull and Ferrari, although I don't remember seeing this before. Certainly can't recall a time when it's happened, by doing the used soft run first of all.
certainly, I think we saw throughout free practice earlier on, cars looking so much more plugged in on the softer compounds of tyres, and that tyre delta between the soft, the medium and the hard looking much greater here as the first flurry of laps start to come in, Harry.
They absolutely have. Fernando Alonso is currently fastest, a 1:26.715 on that soft compound of tyre. Pierre Gasly in the Alpine is just about to cross the line and he goes second fastest, but in this first session we're mainly focused on who can escape the bottom 5, because come the end of the next 13 minutes that bottom 5 will be eliminated and they will line up in Sunday's Grand Prix as they qualified. Sainz crossed the line in 5. So everybody out there on the soft compounded tyre, bar the Mercedes who are on that medium compounded tyre. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas hasn't come out of the pits yet, so he has stayed in there as actually Russell and Bottas both pit. Leclerc crosses the line to go fastest, a 1:26.4, make that 4/10 behind Lando Norris in the McLaren. They didn't look quite on the pace in practice, but again, a really difficult session to get any kind of gauge. The track really does seem to have warmed up a little bit more compared to FP1.
The sound you're hearing is Max Verstappen making his way through the triple right-hander in the mid section of this racetrack and getting a little bit of traffic into turn 15.
Nice. Who is this?
No idea what those two were doing. No idea. You can be slightly more courteous to him, please, Max. Don't tow him down to turn 1.
What an idiot.
Yeah.
Not very happy from Max Verstappen. Interestingly, those two Mercedes reverted directly back to the pits there. So whether they're just putting a scrub on those sets of mediums to try to prepare them for a later session could certainly be the strategy there.
Track limits warnings are flashing up as well, mainly at turn 5 at the moment. Lando Norris, Lance Stroll have just had laps deleted. We also been made aware by the race director that the final corner, turn 16, if you exceed track limits there, the current lap you're on and the next lap will both be deleted. So double pain if you are just gearing up for a fast lap on that occasion.
Sergio Perez making his way out of the final corner, and drivers are trying sequential laps on their set of soft tyres. It's 6th position for Perez, just behind his teammate Max Verstappen, who sits only 5th after this early flurry of laps.
Yeah, still awaiting times from Russell, Norris, who did have a time but it was deleted, Hamilton, who's in the pits, and Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, who is yet to come out of that Haas garage. This is the sound of Liam Lawson's AlphaTauri, the young New Zealand driver, getting another go in place of Daniel Ricciardo as he continues to recover from his broken hand. We expect Ricciardo to be back next time around in Austin, Texas. So it's another run for Lawson, who has certainly impressed so far in just a few Grand Prix that he's had in Formula One, and he comes across the line for an opening gambit of 12th in his AlphaTauri, 1.4 seconds off. Stroll, though, goes up into 9th for his Aston Martin. Stroll off the back of, in the middle of a poor run of things at the moment in comparison to his teammate, but Aston Martin as well seeming to be struggling and keeping up with the development race of those around them. The battle in the constructors really hotting up between them and the likes of McLaren and Ferrari, indeed 3rd, 4th and 5th, but Alonso up there for 3rd in Aston Martin colours at the moment as Tsunoda comes across the line in 5th.
Lovely lap from Yuki Tsunoda, who was very frustrated after his home Grand Prix back in Suzuka, getting caught behind cars, not being able to deliver the pace that he wanted to. Logan Sargent up to 7th in the Williams. He'll be pretty happy with that effort, but purple sector as we jump inside and listen in to Lando Norris through the first sector of the lap on a weekend so important for McLaren to try to snatch more critical ground from Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship.
Absolutely. He's overall best of anybody in Sector 1, losing a bit of time in Sector 2 though.
He's off it.
Yeah,
he's well off it.
He's backed out, hasn't he? So he's decided not to go for this run of things, but is seeing off the lap, and I wonder if he's just gearing up and trying to carry that through. Alonso is fastest on a 1:25.6 ahead of Leclerc, Ocon, Verstappen and Sainz. Then Piastri, Tsunoda, Gasly, Sargent, Perez the top 10, Albon, Stroll, Bottas, Lawson and Magnussen the top 15, and then everybody else 16th and below is currently in the elimination zone. Joe, Norris, Russell, Hamilton and Hülkenberg all in that elimination zone, but we're still waiting to see true representative lap times from them as Norris decided to come into the pits at the end of that lap. Alex Albon crosses the line in his Williams and goes 11th fastest.
Typically a low drag car, the Williams, but they do seem relatively confident this weekend, despite this being a high downforce, high load circuit. As tends to be, the more the circuit rubbers in, the more the circuit comes to the drivers, the more Williams move forward. We've had some impassioned pleas from James Vowles, haven't we, throughout this weekend already on the various political changes going on between all of the teams in Formula One. They'll be looking for a strong weekend this weekend, and Logan Sargent, sitting in P9, actually ahead of his teammate Alex Albon at this stage, will be looking for a very strong weekend to make amends for his recent bumps and scrapes.
He's actually looked quite comfortable. I know we've not seen too much track action because we've only had the one and only free practice session, but Sargent doesn't seem to be a man who is under pressure, because he is, let's make no bones about that.
Well, he was quicker in practice this earlier today, and he's quicker than Alex Albon on that first run. Here's Ocon's radio.
It's very hot in the car.
Okay, mate, understood. We'll have a check over.
Very hot in the pits, mate.
Yeah, and that's not a situation we've seen very often with Logan Sargent. In fact, he's been out-qualified by Alex Albon at every single race this year. It's the only team that's happened in. The other two teams where it's massively skewed in favour of one driver over another are Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso, obviously, and also Red Bull with Max Verstappen.
Yeah, it's 16-0 in qualifying when it comes to Williams in Albon's favour, and Sargent, the driver with the most Q1 eliminations. But right now, he is in 9th. Fernando Alonso is fastest then at the moment in front of Esteban Ocon, who you just heard on the radio. He's come into the pits, then Leclerc. But we're focusing in this Q1 session with just 7 minutes left for everyone basically 16th and below. Magnussen just gets himself out. In the elimination zone right now is Lawson, Joe, Norris, and the 2 Mercedes. But the Mercedes have now come back out of the pits, and they are on that soft compounder tyre, and they are finding time.
Lovely lap from Valtteri Bottas to put the Alfa Romeo up to second. 7 minutes to go. I was worried that neither Mercedes had a lap on the board, but they certainly do now. George Russell up to second position, deposing what was a lovely lap from Valtteri Bottas. Let's see what Hamilton can do. Just moments behind him in third.
Yeah, only 2/10 off Alonso, who is the fastest. Stroll, Joe, Lawson, Magnussen, and Lando Norris now, after having a lap time deleted, they are the current occupants of the elimination zone. So Norris needs to find a clean lap now with 6 minutes remaining. His teammate Oscar Piastri is up in 9th. We know there's pace in that McLaren. You just got to keep it within the white lines.
Track limits down in turn 12 for Lando Norris, and that's why he threw that lap away. He'll have to get out there in relatively short order to get a lap in. He's going to have to string it together through the traffic as well of other drivers backing off. Out-qualified by Oscar Piastri last time out in Suzuka, and somewhat of a pressure moment then for the young Englishman.
I have to say as well, Fernando Alonso's topping the times at the moment, and it does look, Harry, as if he is having a better weekend for Aston Martin. They've dropped off the pace quite significantly in this sort of second half of the season after such a bright first half when he was on the podium at pretty much every race for a while. The other teams have outdeveloped them, but there seems to be some kind of magic between Alonso and Qatar, because he's okay, we've not had new soft tyre runs from the Red Bulls and the Ferraris yet. Norris has had a bit of a difficult time in the McLaren. He's had a lap time deleted for track limits, but Alonso is comfortably quicker than the Mercedes cars, which hasn't been the case for quite some time.
Not at all. I mean, look at Alonso's last 3 qualifyings have been 10th, 7th and 10th. And currently, he's fastest of them all and has looked quite quick already in the one and only practice session. We know he likes this track. On the one visit, he's been here before, back in 2021. Managed to claw his way through the field and onto the podium for the first time in 7 years at that point, to get back on to a Grand Prix podium. But Alonso sitting pretty at the moment. But this is Q1, where we only look to eliminate the bottom 5 drivers with 16th and downwards. Currently, Joe, Albon, Lawson, Magnussen and Norris occupying it. Sergio Perez, though, in the other Red Bull, is out there as well. He is currently down in 13th spot. He's on the soft compounder tyres, and that gap between himself and Verstappen seems to be fairly concurrent throughout the last few qualifyings, where he just doesn't have the pace between 4 and 7 tenths off his teammate, and at the moment he's 6 tenths off in the middle sector off of Leclerc.
We listen on board. Looks fine for Sergio Perez. The steering wheel moving around his hands, his typical style of getting his hands right around the wheel and really wrestling the car into the apex. And this looks like a better lap. It's better in all sectors so far. Will it be enough to keep Perez out of danger? I think it probably will. Up in 4th position, splitting the Mercedes.
Yeah, half a second off Leclerc's time. Lando Norris back out on track in that papaya orange McLaren with the black and chrome blue glints, and he is fastest of anybody in the middle sector. He's currently plumb last without a time. That's because he exceeded track limits on his fast lap and it got deleted. But with one more corner to go around this 16-turn track, Lando Norris comes across the line. The rear wing opens for the drag reduction system, and it's fastest for the Brit by 0.3 of a second, a 1:25.1 for Lando Norris. Lawson gets himself up into 13th with 3 minutes left on the clock. Then Logan Sargent finds himself at risk in the Williams. He comes across the line, and it's a solid lap from Sargent. A 1:26.2 goes 8th fastest. That puts Gasly at risk along with Hulkenberg, Stroll, Joe, Albon and Magnussen, all currently at risk of not taking part in qualifying in the next 2.5 minutes.
Piastri's made his way up into the top 4 in the other McLaren. You can hear Fernando Alonso, though, who was fastest in the speed traps earlier on. We had some data available to us that said he looked fantastic through the mid-corner of turn 16. He's looking fantastic again through the middle sector of the lap, which runs from turn 6 to the exit of turn 11. Rounding the final corner, bit of oversteer. The steering wheel rotating in Fernando Alonso's hands, but it is easily enough. Up to second for him. We've got a battle on for pole, but where on earth are the Red Bulls?
Well, Perez is down in 8th. Max Verstappen is down in 14th, but he is just about to come across the line now. And where does this put him? Never fear. He's straight to the top of the timing screens by just shy of a 10th and a half, a 1:25.0 for Max Verstappen. Albon pops in a time, but it's only good enough for 15th, which is still behind his teammate Logan Sargent. There's a minute and 52 left on the clock. Lawson, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Joe and Kevin Magnussen are all out on track on outlaps at the moment. Will get one final go of it to try and make their way through into Q2.
Logan Sargent losing a lap. We can see him on our screens going wide through the exit of turn 15 and bouncing over the runoff area. Lando Norris, who you could just hear perilously close to the exit curb in turn 15 as well.
And Pierre Gasly as well on the Alpine, having a bit of a moment coming into the fast double right-hander, has to bail out of it, kicks up the sparks and the dust offline, doesn't have too bad coming together with the curbs. That was the sound of Kevin Magnussen's Haas running over the curbs, and that's coming through 15 and on the approach to turn 16, the final corner, and he just puts that car where it doesn't need to be, and the floor attaches right to the part of the curb that then slopes down and drags across and creates the sparks. Magnussen currently last of anybody at the moment. Lawson, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Joe, Magnussen, all at risk at the moment. They need to find time, and right now only Magnussen is really finding any kind of time to get off the bottom of the timing screens at the moment. Bottas is doing well on Alfa Romeo. He's currently through as it stands in 13th. He's going again. Liam Lawson finding time in the first sector as well.
The main offshoot of all of that is both of those Williams are now the drivers at risk. Albon and Sargent are going to be under pressure, I believe, from Lawson and Magnussen in the closing stages. 18 seconds to go in the qualifying session, so this will be the last lap of everybody who comes across the line. And we're listening in then to the Haas as it makes its way through the final few corners. This is Magnussen, who needs to find a lap here. They've tended to be stronger in qualifying and weaker on race day. Can they pull something out of the soft compound tyre here?
DRS open as he crosses the line. He does improve his time, but it's only 17th fastest for Kevin Magnussen as he takes the checkered flag as well. That is the end of Q1. Magnussen unable to get through. Liam Lawson finds time, but not enough. He stays in 16th. Albon lives to fight another day for the time being, but Nico Hulkenberg, this is the sound of the German driver in his Haas, currently in 18th, crosses the line, and his qualifying performances continue to dazzle under the lights. Hulkenberg gets his Haas up into 9th. Piastri improves up up to 4th. That shoves Albon down into 16th. But what can Lance Stroll do? His teammate Fernando Alonso is currently up in 3rd. Round the final corner for Lance Stroll. He opens his DRS and crosses the line, finds time, but it's only 17th fastest for the Canadian, who cannot progress through into Q2.
I cannot believe that is not enough for Lance Stroll, who lets Logan Sargent off the hook massively at this stage. The big scalp, the two big scalps in that session for me, Alex Albon and Lance Stroll, out in Q1, unless Albon can find a lap across the line. This time he just deposes his teammate.
Just at the end, he lost a bit of time in that middle sector to Alex Albon, but he pips his teammate right at the very end, less than a 10th in it between the two Williams drivers, but that means one progresses through to 15th place for Alex Albon, and sadly it's another Q1 elimination for Logan Sargent. At the end then of Q1, we have lost Logan Sargent in 16th, Lance Stroll in 17th, Liam Lawson 18th, Kevin Magnussen in 19th, and Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo 20th and last.
God, I had all sorts planned to say after that, Harry, and suddenly it all changes right at the last minute. I was thinking, Haas of having to hold on until Austin till they get this upgrade, and then Hulkenberg goes and does that.
Man. That left him on the table on the high speed.
That was Logan Sargent there, and you can hear the disappointment in his voice as well, but there's something to take away from that. Less than a 10th between himself and Albon. I don't think he'll be too disappointed with that, Alex. I mean, he will be, but it's a smaller gap than usual.
It is a smaller gap than usual, but it's an unfortunate scenario for Sargent, because Albon now, of course, heads through to the next part of qualifying, and Albon will have a chance to head again through qualifying and maybe improve his position. Sargent, of course, now locked in 16th place. Just the misfortune continues, I feel, acknowledging he left some time on the table in the high speed, perhaps as a legacy of all of those incidents he's had through the year.
And of course, Logan Sargent, also the driver who's suffered the most Q1 eliminations this season, adding another one to that tally. But I think, perhaps he can take some solace from the fact that he's out-qualified some other stronger contenders, and perhaps you should put Kevin Magnussen as one of those, seeing as his teammates just done a very good job to haul a very difficult Haas up into P10. So more to come from Nico Hulkenberg, and you said, didn't you, Harry, his qualifying performance just continues to dazzle.
Yeah.
He's doing something special on now a Friday, but normally a Saturday.
I mean, it's now 12-5 in Hulkenberg's favour. Here's Alonso.
Yeah, Leclerc destroyed that one lap, but okay.
Yeah, he overtook, didn't he? It was a bit of a joke. He started right behind you.
That was Alonso complaining about Leclerc, who was getting a cheeky toe down the main straight and then moved to the inside of turn 1 late on the brakes and overtook Alonso as they both going for flying laps. So a bit of a cheeky one there from Leclerc.
Not making many friends out there, were they? The two Ferraris. Several incidents of potential impeding there. We'll see if there's anything going on in the stewards as a result of those different incidents.
Just hearing from Fernando Alonso, obviously getting a little bit cross on the radio, but his teammate, I'm sure, will have been cross on the radio to finish P17 there. What is going on at Aston Martin? Fernando Alonso just always rising to the top, and Lance Stroll just cannot get a handle on this car.
He's struggling, isn't he? And it's another consecutive Q1 elimination. And Fernando Alonso, as a teammate, it is a massive barometer to go up against anyway, but the gap plus the mistakes that are coming in now, the big crash in Singapore for Lance Stroll, you wonder, is his confidence taking a knock as well? Because Lance Stroll is not a bad driver. You don't get a podium in your first season, you don't get pole position, you don't perform well and have good racecraft in junior series and fight for titles without being a bad driver. But you can tell how frustrated he is, because we've just seen a replay of him getting out of his Aston Martin, clearly frustrated, takes a glove off and then walks to the back of the garage and almost smacks the wall, the partitioning divide, before he heads in to the back into his driver room, helmet on, and clear anger and frustration there for Lance Stroll, who at best will start 17th tomorrow, while his teammate at the end of that was 3rd fastest. I do just want to bring it back quickly, because we didn't really finish off the Hulkenberg chat. It's now 12-5 in Hulkenberg's favour, but for some reason Magnussen cannot perform as well in qualifying compared to teammate Hulkenberg, but unfortunately in the race it tends to level out and Hulkenberg just tends to drop like a stone. So it's brilliant to see that pace able to be extracted in that Haas, but I can't see that carrying through into the race.
Just looking at those stats for Lance Stroll, who I'm sure has gone into a cool, dark room somewhere to take out his stresses and strains after that Q1. Pointless at the last 4 Grand Prix. Obviously didn't even start Singapore because of his crash at the end of Q1. And he's failed to get beyond Q1 in the last 3 qualifying sessions, now make that 4. And of course, you don't need to be a scientist to know that Fernando Alonso's reached Q3 at every race, and it looks like he could be heading that way this evening as well. So it's a really tough one, because once you start down these sort of black holes, you struggle to get out. And Alex, as a driver, that mindset shift, does Lance need that? What does it need to go his way? Just a clean weekend and just something to click, or people to stop talking about why he's not contributing to the championship standings?
Confidence so important behind the wheel, and it's tangible. You know, when you apply the throttle, apply the brakes, that smoothness and calmness of the way you do so all comes from confidence and belief in yourself as a driver. You get an inherent sense as well when you're within a team as to how much they believe in you. It's unavoidable. No matter how much the team boss stands outside and says we believe in the drivers, no matter how much, you know, everyone around you is making the right noises, you know if they believe in you or not. On another incident, I'm just getting a piece of information that says that Hamilton, Tsunoda, Lawson and Piastri have been noted for failing to follow the race director's instructions on maximum lap time. That is how slowly you can drive from the pit lane to the start of your flying lap. There is a maximum limit as to how slow that lap can be. So it'll be interesting if there is a further offshoot from that after the first part of qualifying.
Well, with the lights continuing to stay on here at this Losail circuit, we are now getting into the second part of qualifying. Q2, we've lost Logan Sargent in the Williams, Lance Stroll for Aston Martin, Liam Lawson in the AlphaTauri, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, and Joe Guan Yu in the Alfa Romeo. That is 16th and downwards, and now we will eliminate the next slowest 5 drivers. So it's essentially a battle to get through into the top 10, but the green light is on at the end of the pit lane, and 15 minutes is already counting down to 13 minutes and 50 seconds, and they do crawl out of the pit lane, don't they? Fernando Alonso is going so slowly as he comes out.
So this is an offshoot of what Max Verstappen did back in Singapore, where he ground to a halt at the end of the pit lane, and the play on was waved. And ever since then, remember, Andrew, back in Suzuka, drivers have been really slowing at the end of the pit lane.
Yeah, and it's all connected to what you were talking about, Alex, with the maximum lap time. Basically, this is a very demanding track on tyres. Lots of high-speed corners, long corners, to put a lot of load through the tyres. Pirelli tyres, they overheat, basically. You only have to sneeze on them and they overheat. So they're trying to keep them under control in terms of temperature. So slow outlaps are a benefit on this track because you keep the temperature in the tyres as low as possible. So that's why actually it's an unfair advantage, you could argue, if you run your lap slower than the race director said you can, because the others are all sticking to it. Their tyres are going up in temperature as a result, and therefore you have to manage them through the lap even more, if that's the case, through the flying lap, that is. Whether you should have Formula 1 tyres that you have to manage through a qualifying lap is a whole other debate, but let's not get into that today. So it's going to be interesting, as you say, Alex, to see how that develops as the session goes on.
Our audience may ask, why don't they start with them colder, or why don't they let them cool down in the garage? And the answer to both of those questions is you're not allowed by regulation. Pirelli do not allow you to start underneath the minimum temperature, and so it is a bit of a hack, if you like, to cruise to the end of the pit lane in that way.
And the reason Pirelli don't allow you to do that is because the tyres are also vulnerable to failure, and they have to pump them up much higher than the teams and drivers would want to in terms of pressure to stop that failure happening. So that's all these things are connected, and it's all to do with the quality of the tyres, and there's a whole other debate to be had about that, not in the middle of the qualifying session.
No, we'll save that for another free practice session, or perhaps a check of Black
coming
podcast
to a podcast near you. That one
exactly. Get stuck into that later today. Those are the voices of the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson alongside racing driver Alex Brundle in the commentary box with myself, Harry Benjamin, Rosanna Tennant down in the pits. This is qualifying for Sunday's Qatar Grand Prix. It's a sprint weekend, but that is now all reserved for Saturday's sprint action. Right now, it is the fastest lap you can do to set your grid spot for Sunday's Grand Prix. We have already had Q1 and eliminated the slowest 5 drivers. Next up is the next 5, 11th down to 15th. Q2 well and truly underway. And right now, it's looking fairly close that Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin is fast. So are the McLarens and the Ferraris. You've even got a Hülkenberg and a Bottas up there as well. Getting through into the top 10 isn't guaranteed for a lot of these people. And Red Bull were looking, well, in Perez's hands at least, like struggling on the back foot or struggling to fire up initially.
Yeah, they weren't as strong as perhaps one might have expected them to be in the early phases of the session. Oscar Piastri getting across the line first in his McLaren, setting a 125.7. But we have seen there's going to be a lot of tyre play going on throughout this weekend, such as the limitation of this soft tyre. So we heard that there were many teams running that used set of soft tyres and trying to basically scrabble their way through the first part of qualifying to save tyres for later in the weekend. Red Bull could easily have been that set of teams, as we see Charles Leclerc around the final corner in his Ferrari.
Yeah, he was looking super quick. He rounds the final corner. Sparks flying at one point on this lap, and he crosses the line and he goes fast. It's a 1:25.348 with 10 minutes to go of Q2, Rosanna.
Yeah, it's interesting listening into the team radio. Fernando Alonso just being told that the McLarens aren't doing a warm-up lap, and having only had just one practice session, it seems like the teams are just desperate to get any sort of idea as to what the others are up to, what they might be on in terms of a run plan. And of course, that's then crucial when it comes to traffic management, which is something we heard Fernando Alonso complaining about, with Charles Leclerc trying to overtaking him, ruining his lap or destroying his lap, as Fernando said. So the teams need to be aware of what everyone's up to, and it's amazing, isn't it, how they've got enough bandwidth and enough depth in their team and the resource to be listening across all the different team radios.
When you also see the background of what goes into the team radio resource as well, it is exceptional. So even being on the pit wall and trying to listen in is a tough enough task. Max Verstappen has gone fastest, the 1:24.758. Everybody from 11th down will be eliminated, but we're still waiting for everybody to come across the line and set their first competitive lap times. And Lando Norris decides he's bailing out of his lap as he comes around the final corner and comes into the pits. And I think, Alex, did he run wide?
Is it going to be another track limits for Lando Norris? He's already backed out of the lap there as he heads then down to turn 6. And the AlphaTauri comes across the racetrack at him on the entry to turn 6, while Lando Norris is on the right-hand side on the ideal line. And the McLaren having to take evasive action there just as he's already backed out of his lap. But we didn't see why it was that Lando backed out of his lap initially, because that was not the cause. George Russell is fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Pierre Gasly's put in a good time to get his Alpine up into second. Ocon and the Alpine was up there as well in the top 5 at the end of Q1. Have Alpine brought something this weekend? We know they have brought some upgrades, a new floor, rear corner and some cooling elements to that Alpine. Let's see if it delivers straight away into this qualifying. Hamilton crosses the line and slots in behind his teammate in third. It's Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Gasly, Alonso the top 5, Leclerc, Perez, Tsunoda, Piastri, Hülkenberg the top 10, and then currently in the elimination zone is Sainz, Bottas, Ocon, Norris and Albon.
So a couple of interesting things to look at from that first set of runs there. Verstappen, McLaren and Ferrari were all on used tyres. Alonso was not, and so he's surprisingly slow, and he aborted his first lap. So I wonder whether he made a mistake and then the best of the tyres were gone for him. Russell and Hamilton, it's looked like Russell has a couple of tenths on Hamilton so far today, and he does again on that run so far to put him second behind Verstappen. But bear in mind, as I say, he's a couple of tenths behind Verstappen, but Verstappen's on used tyres on that run. So it just goes to show how far ahead Verstappen is.
Yeah, down in 7th at the moment. Well, that's his team actually. Perez is down in 7th at the moment. Verstappen 2 tenths clear at the top. Albon comes across the line, and it's 10th fastest for the Williams man, who knocked his teammate out in Q1 to skate through into Q2 and is currently in the top 10 in front of Piastri, Hülkenberg. Sainz is on a outlap at the moment. Then Bottas and Norris still waiting to see competitive lap times from Lando Norris.
Interesting to see both McLaren sitting there in the drop zone. We have seen them both wide. Oscar Piastri was worried before the weekend began about the potential for damage to the specific floor of that McLaren and how susceptible it is to losing downforce if you bump and run wide over the curbs. I wonder, as we've rolled through Q1 into Q2, whether they are just losing that bit of performance.
Perhaps, yeah. The other thing to look at from that session is, from that run, is Perez. According to the time screens, he's on new tyres, and yet he's in 7th place, a long way behind Verstappen. 7/10 or something? And that just sort of bleeds into this conversation that's been having, a question I should say really, that's being asked up and down the paddock all year, certainly since Verstappen took a step forward, is everybody accepts the Red Bull's the best car in the field by some margin, but they're asking how much of the advantage that is being seen this year is the car and how much is Verstappen?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Rosanna?
It certainly is, and actually I'm not totally sure that Sergio Perez's lap wasn't inhibited in some way by Charles Leclerc. We've heard Charles Leclerc's his name being used rather a lot on the team radio in the last few minutes. So Sergio Perez complaining to his race engineer Hugh Bird about Charles Leclerc, and his engineer Hugh saying, yeah, we saw Leclerc. So maybe some traffic may have played into Sergio's lap time. Hopefully we might see a replay or hear a little more on the radio. I'll keep across it.
It's almost like Ferrari are having a radio issue this weekend. They seem to find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time a lot throughout traffic, as we see
just standard
Sainz.
Ferrari, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sainz backed off. He was going
backed
really
well out of
quick.
it through the mid-corner of turn 4.
So Sainz was on a fast lap, but then decided to back out of it. He needs to get a lap time in, though, with less than 5 minutes. This is the sound of his teammate Charles Leclerc, who is currently 6th fastest, and he is out there on a set of soft compound tyres. And I wonder did Sainz go? Did he exceed track limits?
Yeah,
I think
Sainz
he
is
did.
going to go wide through the mid-corner. He's just going to get wide and then doesn't make it back to the second apex.
Yeah, kicks up a bit of dust and sand offline as well. And this is the sound of his teammate Charles Leclerc through the double right-hander, turns 4 and 5, and just gets all crossed up.
Doing broadly the same thing as his teammate did a few moments before. So they are both out of it. Drop zone at the moment. Piastri, Hülkenberg, Sainz, Bottas and Norris, who is the only driver in this session who's really yet to set a representative time.
Yeah, he's on an out lap at the moment, is Lando Norris. Piastri as well is down there. Actually, Norris is going for it, isn't he? In that first sector. Piastri also coming through the first sector. He's currently in 11th spot. Everybody from 11th down will be eliminated in the next 3.5 minutes or so. Albon just about through at the moment, but less than half a tenth between himself. Then comes Piastri, then Hülkenberg, Sainz, who needs a good lap, along with Bottas and Lando Norris. But Piastri currently almost 7/10 up in the middle sector to get through into Q3. Lando Norris very much with him, 8/10 actually. Going quicker is Lando Norris. First across the line will be Oscar Piastri. Round the final corner, applies the throttle up through the gears. The DRS line awaits, the rear wing flap slides open, and Piastri goes fastest. The Australian rookie, a 1:24.724. His teammate Lando Norris crosses the line and immediately deposes him. Less than half a tenth between the two McLarens. Norris ahead of Piastri.
Well, that answers our question on damage, doesn't it? Just a messy first run for the team operated and team managed by Andrea Stella. And they are really getting their head down. It's almost like they went straight out there, suffered with the balance, came in, sorted it, and got back out there and delivered. Charles Leclerc is the Ferrari that's arcing its way through the dual right-hander of turn 4. And actually, it's the final few corners, isn't it, for Charles Leclerc? Through the mid-corner of turn 15, sparks flying from the base of that Ferrari, and he finds himself slithering slightly wide of the apex right-hander of turn 16. Across the line he streaks, and to 5th position he goes.
He does indeed. It's Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, Russell, Leclerc, the top 5. Hamilton, Gasly, Alonso, Perez and Tsunoda, the top 10. And then at risk of elimination, currently in 11th, Esteban Ocon. 12th, Alex Albon. Nico Hülkenberg behind him in 13th. Carlos Sainz, who is now on starting another fast lap, and then Valtteri Bottas. And we're just hearing the sounds of Max Verstappen on the radio.
What is he doing, man? He's defending. You see that? Almost crashed into him.
And that was Max Verstappen, who was trying to get past the Ferrari as he tried to battle with him. I wonder, was it Carlos Sainz? And nearly coming together, as Sainz was very much trying to defend his track position against Verstappen. And Verstappen, I think, fairly not happy about it on the radio.
There will be a huge loss here with regards to starting a lap behind another driver. Yes, you're going to get a tow down that front straight, but you're also going to lose out through all of those long flowing corners, and perhaps not wanting to concede track position there in the Ferrari, purely so he doesn't lose downforce through the rest of the lap. But there will definitely be something done about that. In any case, we sit on board, listen on board with Carlos Sainz as he makes his way through turn 15 on a lap which is much improved, sitting in 14th position in the Ferrari at the moment. Verstappen hits the front in the Red Bull. What can Sainz do about it through the exit of 16?
Round the final corner for Carlos Sainz, the only man to have won a race other than Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez this year, and Sainz goes up into 9th spot, awaiting times from Hülkenberg, who comes across the line. It's 11th fastest for the Haas man. Bottas as well. Where does Perez land? Bottas gets up into 9th, ahead of Carlos Sainz. And this is the sound of Sergio Perez, who then goes up himself into 9th. So Perez 9th, Bottas 10th, Sainz then back down into 11th in front of Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, who's on a lap at the moment, as is Ocon and Alex Albon.
Interesting engine note for Perez there as he backed out of it across the line, really regenerating the energy. Yuki Tsunoda across the line will not be good enough to get him out of the drop zone in the AlphaTauri.
So Sainz is out. He's 12th. Yep. I don't think we quite clocked that with that finish of that lap. He's obviously had a really difficult session because that was his fastest time. He's just improved and there's no more time left.
Carlos Sainz, well, he got himself up into 9th fastest, and then Bottas and Perez came through and quickly displaced him. So Sainz will not get time for another lap. The two Alpines managed to skate through. They're in 5th and 6th at the moment. Sergio Perez is on the bubble. Lewis Hamilton is down in 8th. Who's going quick in that bottom 5 at the moment? Alex Albon is finding time throughout the sectors. He's lost a bit of time in the first sector, found time in the middle sector as he runs wide coming through the exit of turn 15. He only had one more corner to run, did Alex Albon. He has to get out of the way of the Aston Martin, which grounds him, but Albon will not get through into Q3. And at the end of all of that, it's Tsunoda out, along with Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari and Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, out in Q2 in front of Albon and Nico Hülkenberg. That is disaster for Sainz and disaster for Perez. Let's hear from Sainz first. Sounding rather confined to that. They saw the writing was on the wall there.
So Perez lost a lap. Perez lost a lap in turn 5, which is why he's found himself out. He did have a lap good enough to get him through, but finds himself out of the session along with Carlos Sainz. I didn't see a specific track limit event for Sainz, but we saw both Ferraris wide earlier on.
Did we made it? No, that time's been deleted. Turn 5. Okay, that's P13. Sainz P12.
Wow, what a sequence of races for Sergio Perez, out in Suzuka and now out in Q2 here in Qatar. It doesn't get much worse than that behind the wheel of a Red Bull, does it?
No, and he gets kicked up on the jacks in that Red Bull and wheeled back in to the garage. Perez then out and will at best start 13th for Sunday's Grand Prix, just behind the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Yuki Tsunoda only missing out by 0.04 of a second to get his AlphaTauri into Q3. So it's Tsunoda, Sainz, Perez, Albon in the Williams and Hülkenberg in the Haas that are out at the end of Q2.
Those are some big scalps, guys. Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez. I'm sitting outside Ferrari's hospitality area, and the guy who sort of runs around with a dictaphone and a cap for Carlos Sainz just come legging it down the stairs, obviously not anticipating seeing his driver until the very end of qualifying. Pedro's now running to find Carlos, because I'm sure they'll be heading to talk about that session to F1 and to the media. That was a scrappy session from Ferrari, and actually, even on Charles Leclerc's side of the garage, it was Charles Leclerc telling his race engineer, "I'll push next lap," and the engineer saying, "Copy." It's like the tail's wagging the dog a little bit there.
Yes, it absolutely is. We're just seeing some replays as well, Rosanna. We think we've been shown where Sergio Perez's lap time was deleted, and to us, it looked very much on the bubble, and more so that he wasn't exceeding track limits, as we saw the reasoning as well for Albon finding the runoff area, and actually did very well to save that Williams, as he was having a bit of a moment from the corner before.
So close for Sergio Perez, and I wouldn't be surprised if Red Bull don't go and potentially appeal that one, although there's not much they can do about it now. They can't exactly reinsert him into Q3. I mean, Carlos Sainz, you're talking about the man who's taken 2 of the last 3 pole positions in Formula One. Just an absolutely disastrous session. I think that's the nature of having this tiny amount of time to prepare the cars and the drivers for the qualifying session, and that's what we're seeing here. It's just, this is what happened when these teams, these kind of behemoths of motorsport, just are robbed of all of their options to try things. We're going to have a very, very mixed up grid, aren't we, on Sunday?
Absolutely, that's what we were hoping for, and it makes me chuckle when you say you can't just reinsert Checo Perez into Q3.
Yeah.
You can reinsert him into the Japanese Grand Prix. You can reinsert him anywhere you like, apparently. So Perez is now out of the car, and I found it interesting that his race engineer Hugh Bird said over the radio, "Oh, and Carlos Sainz, yeah, just ahead of you in P12," almost trying to make him feel better. It's like, yeah, but mate, your teammate is up in P2 and Q2, and we pretty much expect him to take pole position. So yes, trying to sort of dumb down the pain that I'm sure Checo will be feeling. This isn't going his way on a weekend where he needed to be performing at his absolute best.
Well, yeah, but we've been saying that all year long, haven't we? I hate the fact that this brings up more conversation around Sergio Perez and his need to perform in that Red Bull, but that is the reality of the situation.
I mean, he was 8 tenths off, you know.
But that's been the going rate for the last few races, hasn't it? And that's the issue, isn't it? It's been 7-8 tenths, but we come to think that as normal.
But also it's track limits. I feel like we're going back to Austria again, where he couldn't even get a banker in. It's just sort of, he's got the car that he could just cruise round, and yet he finds himself making silly mistakes and having track time, times deleted. It just is really, really silly mistakes here and there from Perez.
He'll rue that one, because it was very, very close on the outside of turn 5. Really unfortunate, actually, for Sergio Perez. But even still, you can argue certainly that he should have had a lap in earlier on that might have just, when your teammate is out front and delivering the laps that Max Verstappen is, you can argue that Sergio Perez at that stage of the session should have a lap in that scrapes him through, even if the big one at the end of Q2 doesn't quite work out.
And when you know this track ramps up. So, again, as you say, the behemoths of the sport should know that sort of thing. They're not a back marker team. They know the score is on the other side of the garage. Max Verstappen's mechanics getting his car ready for the next part of qualifying. Q3 is going to be interesting. We were predicting a mixed up grid, both for, I'm sure, the sprint tomorrow and also now the Grand Prix on Sunday. Be worth tuning in for.
Certainly will. Interestingly, we just saw a shot of Sainz still sitting in the Ferrari as though he didn't really realise he had to get out of it.
Pedro, his media guy, is going to be holding that dictaphone for minutes to come
before the end of qualifying. He sat there like, what happens if I'm out in Q2?
Well, I wonder if he's been told just to sit tight for a little bit, just in case somebody else drops out. All he needs is 2 other drivers to have lap times deleted ahead of him, and then Sainz would be through and able to participate in Q3. But as it currently stands, our timing screen is not really lighting up with anything like that. This is the sound of Sergio Perez and the track limits violation coming through the right-hander of 4 into 5. And I mean, it's close. Does all 4 wheels run past the white line?
Definitely.
Yeah, they do.
I think he was over by a couple of inches probably, and over is over. But I mean, this is existential for Sergio Perez. You know, Red Bull, okay, at the moment, they don't need Perez. He's second in the championship. They don't need him to be any closer to Verstappen. But if the other teams close up next year, Red Bull won't be able to tolerate this level of performance anymore. So, I mean, the question is, who do they put in alongside Verstappen if it's not Perez, with all the big names signed up elsewhere, apart from Alonso, who's available at the end of next year. But, you know, he's going to lose his seat if he can't up his level of performance next year.
Well, we are getting Q3 underway, and a name who I wasn't expecting to see up in Q3, Valtteri Bottas, leading them out onto the track. You've still got Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon and Charles Leclerc and Fernando Alonso in this fight for pole position. Harry, talk us through it. Just under 11 and a half minutes of Q3 to go.
With pleasure, Rosanna. And the two Alpines as well. I mean, we say this every weekend. Have we spoken about Alpine yet? They seem a little bit anonymous, but they've both cars, Gasly and Ocon, maybe a little bit of a frictious relationship off track, but certainly on track. They're gelling well with their cars, and they are both through into Q3, which is already counting down. Just over 11 minutes left to set the fastest lap you can and cement your spot in the top 10 for Sunday's Grand Prix. This is a sprint weekend, but all the sprint action is reserved for Saturday. We'll have the sprint shootout, the qualifying for the sprint, followed by the sprint race, all on Saturday. But right now, this is all about Sunday's main Grand Prix, where the full points are handed out. Is it a silly question to ask who your pick for pole is?
It's not a silly question, but it's a quick answer. I think Max Verstappen is going to take pole position, but I'm seeing way more of a mixed up grid than I was expecting to for this session, and what the remaining order will be is absolutely anyone's guess here. The McLarens look strong, so do the Ferraris. Fernando Alonso for me is the wild card in this session, who's had very variable performance throughout this weekend so far. I think it's strong for Alpine to be involved, but I don't think they're necessarily the picks for pole, although on these they're making a bit of a happy hunting ground of these downforce sensitive high load circuits, aren't they, Alpine? Perhaps because there's a little bit less sensitivity to power here with that Renault engine. But one thing's for sure, it's not going to be as big a distance as I perhaps feared it would be. We've only seen a couple of tenths as the circuit's been moving forward, unless Verstappen manages to find some proper magic in this final session, which, let's be honest, are we counting out?
Well, you've done it now. Commentator's curse right there, isn't it?
Well, I fenced that, didn't I? So sorry about that.
If you say so. Right, 9.5 minutes then, and first lap time's being done. Everybody out on this Losail track. We're about 10 kilometres away from the Losail Stadium, where Argentina beat France to win the World Cup last year. We're about half an hour drive from the city of Doha, north of Doha, and to the east of the track is the Persian Gulf here, with the sand surrounding this 5.4 kilometre, 3.3 mile track.
And we've just seen another example of Charles Leclerc going wide at turns 4 and 5, an example of why that Ferrari is so difficult in long corners, and an example of why Carlos Sainz is out in 12th place. And actually the gap, it wasn't like it was a massive underperformance from Sainz. It was a couple of tenths, 2.5 tenths behind Leclerc in that second session. That's not unusual as a gap between those two when Leclerc's on form. I think the Ferrari is just proving a very, very difficult car around this track.
You ask it to brake and turn, it's just not happy, and it's what they have been describing, the drivers. So many corners around this twisting, turning, long and flowing circuit require braking and turning at the same time. The Ferrari very much unhappy. Fernando Alonso looking somewhat happier as he rounds turn 16, the first of our drivers to put in a competitive flying lap.
And then comes Alonso, 1:25.257 goes fastest. 2 Mercedes, 2 Alpines, 2 McLarens, as Lando Norris goes fastest in his McLaren, and Oscar Piastri's hounding the curves on his lap at the moment. Just the 1 Red Bull and the 1 Alfa Romeo and the 1 Ferrari. A bit of a mixed up top 10. Let's see how it unfolds over the next 7 minutes and 40 seconds, and Verstappen is already going fastest of anybody in the first sector. Piastri does come across the line and he goes fastest, 7/10 clear of Fernando Alonso, but this is the sound of Max Verstappen as Lando Norris's time is deleted for track limits, so he'll have to go again. He's making a little bit of a habit of that so far throughout these qualifying segments. Here comes Verstappen off across the line and he goes fastest, a 1:23.778.
7/10 clear of the time delivered by the McLaren of Oscar Piastri. George Russell will be the next man through in the Mercedes, and then it will be Lewis Hamilton who's rounding sector 2 as we speak. Russell up to second, and what's a lovely performance. Lewis Hamilton will be next through, but he's still making his way through the final sector of the lap. The car looking very much plugged in, soft and controlled movements of the steering wheel for Lewis Hamilton, the way we see him drive week in, week out. It's measured, it's calm, but is it fast enough? Yes, for second position over his teammate, 6/10 behind George Russell, only 5/10 behind Max Verstappen for Lewis Hamilton.
Only 5, and still relatively early stages in Q3 at the very least. Leclerc comes across the line and he is 5th fastest behind the McLaren of Piastri. It's Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell the top 3, Piastri, Leclerc the top 5, Ocon, Alonso, Gasly, Bottas and Lando Norris the top 10. Norris having a lap time deleted for track limits. He's come into the pits, so he'll be a little bit on the back foot then, will Lando Norris, but those McLarens are looking fast as well, as demonstrated throughout this qualifying so far, and by his teammate Piastri up in 4th at the moment as he comes into the pits. Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari continuing to have trouble on this Losail circuit. This is the sound of the Monegasque, comes into the right-hander and then the rear just starts to run away from him.
So that was early in the session, meaning the time he now has on the board is the second flying lap then in that Ferrari. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren also troubling the curbs as well. Sparks flying from the rear of the papaya and black car. And Charles Leclerc getting a lot of traffic.
Was the Ferrari on a push lap?
Yes, he was. Sorry.
That's Lando Norris then, and getting an apology from his engineer, who they are and should be spotting the traffic and to tell them to get out of the way if there's a faster car coming through on a hot lap, and it clearly on that occasion appeared to be a little bit of miscommunication.
We are seeing a lot of these impeding incidents on screen, but we're not seeing a lot of investigations as a result of them, are we here? Nothing I've seen has been noted specifically by race control. So as far as I'm concerned, they're getting away with it.
Currently are. Well, everybody is back into the pit. So now we get a little bit of a lull. What's going on in the garages right now, Alex, as we get ready for, I suppose, the final flurry of fast times?
Obviously, fuel levels being redressed for the final run. And then a little bit of preparation, perhaps a driver data being offered to the driver from their teammate or from wherever else they can get it. And then any adjustments that they want to make. There are flap adjustments available. The front wing can be changed, or a discussion on what you might want to do with the diff, the differential in the rear of the car, the mid, the front, through the middle of the corner, entry or exit phase.
Well, everybody is in the pits at the moment, Rosanna, as we play the waiting game before they all head back out on track again.
Yeah, it's that lull, isn't it, as they reassess and want to go again. Charles Leclerc, the only Ferrari in the top 10. Carlos Sainz has just walked past me. Big exhalation from him. His race overall rolled down, walking past his team's hospitality. Had a quick glance at the timing screens, just trying to keep tabs on what was going on. But you could see frustration clearly on his face as he went backstage in the Ferrari hospitality area. I'm sure he will be furious after what's been such a great few races for the Spanish driver.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering if anyone's checked on Lance Stroll's Aston Martin garage as well. That definitely took a bit of a pummeling from the Canadian when he went out in Q1. Lots of drivers frustrated in what has been quite an enthralling qualifying. Have you got news on that, Rosanna?
Yeah, it wasn't just the garage. He also pushed his trainer aside. So, yeah, tricky evening for Lance Stroll. Hopefully apologies all round. And we know they talk about how they get heated on the radio, and I'm sure moments like that you get heated, but it's not very acceptable, is it, to be pushing people about in the garage just because you've had a shoddy qualifying session?
No, it's not, no matter how high tensions rise. I'm sure there'll be some discussions ongoing within that Aston Martin garage. They've still got one Aston Martin in the fight, though, as has been the case for pretty much all season with Fernando Alonso. And We're getting back out there then for the final runs in this qualifying. Verstappen currently has provisional pole in front of Hamilton and Russell. Then comes Piastri and Leclerc, the top 5. Ocon, Alonso, Gasly, Bottas and Norris, the top 10. Norris hasn't got a representative lap time yet. His one lap time that he had was deleted for exceeding track limits. So he has really got one flyer, and that's all he can do.
It's been a messy session all round for Norris. Had a track limits incident in every part of qualifying. They've looked relatively quick though, McLaren popping up at the top of the order. Oscar Piastri doing a fabulous job for them as well. But the surprise of the session so far have been Mercedes, who really appear to have a car underneath them here mechanically in these long corners. Been saying before the weekend that they're starting finally to get their head around the car with 6 races to go. You'd want to think they are. And yeah, so there is we're getting a feel for the domination of the track from various drivers. You can see, we can see Hamilton quicker through the early first sector of the lap. Max Verstappen much faster through the later sectors of the lap, through from turn 6 onwards, and seems much quicker in general. But we could just catch in the corner of our eye on the screens available to us here in the comm box that Max Verstappen has been off in turn 4 and 5 and may well lose that first flying lap.
Yeah, he's run wide, and with just over a minute left, he currently has provisional pole, but he has run wide. We've seen it in the corner of the screen that's being shown to us. This is the sound right now, though, of Lando Norris, who has 1 lap and 1 lap only. He cannot afford any mistakes. His teammate is currently up in 4th position and also on an out lap, but Lando Norris with the soft compound of tyres then going for a faster lap time as he makes his way round the double right-hander, manages to negotiate the curves into one of the few heavy braking zones that they have around here. He runs a little bit deep, but actually it's quite nice, takes the curbs nicely, doesn't run too far over them. It's a personal best in sector 1 as Valtteri Bottas is also finding time as well in the middle sector. The Alfa Romeo up there in 9th too, and Norris then with 20 seconds remaining runs a little bit out wide. He puts all 4 wheels over the white line. Let's see how far he gets away with that, but he's lost time in the middle sector as well, but that's on Verstappen. He's about a 10th and a half down on the Dutchman as it currently stands. Verstappen has come into the pits. He's not going to be able to set another lap time. Can anyone match Verstappen and beat him? Now is the time to do so, but nobody at the moment is finding too much time. Norris rounds the final corner. Alonso goes 3rd fastest for Aston Martin. What's Norris got as he comes across the line? It's 2nd fastest for Lando Norris, but will he keep it? He's struggled to keep it within the track limits, and it will be watched. He's 3/10 down on Verstappen as it currently stands. This is the sound of George Russell in the Mercedes, who are both flying at the moment. Hamilton currently in 3rd, Russell down in 5th, and coming into the final sector now. Round the final corner for Russell, up through the gears to the DRS line. The rear wing flap flies open. It's 3rd fastest for George Russell.
Lovely lap from George Russell, but they are not close to Max Verstappen. Oscar Piastri will be the 2nd McLaren to cut the beam. Lando Norris 2/10 back in 2nd place. Has Piastri got the pace of his teammate? It will be only 4th for the Australian driver. Verstappen first out on track, turned up, put the lap in and parked it. That is how much performance he has. 3/10 clear of the McLaren next down the road.
Gasly goes 8th in his Alpine ahead of his teammate Esteban Ocon, and that is how qualifying will stand. A 40th career pole position for Max Verstappen. Fantastic work from him. A 30th career pole position, I should say. 40th will come, I'm sure, very quickly, but he didn't even need to be on the track in the final few moments of that qualifying to secure his place at the front of the pack for Sunday's Grand Prix in front of Lando Norris.
Sometimes.
Lando not happy with his performance, and I suspect he feels he left that 3/10 on the table somewhere round the lap. Let's have a look at it. And
I'm wondering if there's a track limits coming here.
Yeah, we can see Lando Norris arcing his way into turn 10, and indeed he climbs all over the curb with a load of oversteer, an armful of oversteer for Lando Norris through the mid-corner of turn 10 and puts him wide, and that is a lap that will not count then for Lando Norris.
Yeah, it hasn't flashed up yet on our timing screens, but it appears only a matter of time, and now that was the sound of a replay of Max Verstappen and why he bailed out on his final lap, Alex.
Yes, I believe, though, that was the second lap, the second sequential lap that Max Verstappen tried to put in. And so he already had a lap on the board, an improvement on the board, Max Verstappen, but he boxed the car. We also saw Lewis Hamilton unable to improve as well. So several drivers unable to improve through the final stages of qualifying.
Well, it is all smiles for Max Verstappen, who is out of the car, a towel wrapped around his neck, and takes a little sip. I'm sure it's probably Red Bull. And with his cap going on, he awaits to be interviewed. But he will start Sunday's Qatar Grand Prix from pole position at the moment in front of Lando Norris. But we suspect a penalty to come Norris's way. But he's second on the road at the end of Q3 in front of Russell, Piastri, Hamilton, the top five, Alonso, Leclerc, the two Alpines of Gasly and Ocon in 8th and 9th, and Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo gets a top 10 start for the Finnish racer. But that was a qualifying session, Alex, that felt like it was a bit all over the place.
Fraught with errors at the end from various drivers, which is why it felt a little bit damp at the end of that qualifying session, because there was only really Lando Norris potentially shooting at an improvement, and then he's come across the line with a better lap. Whether he's able to keep that lap, Lewis Hamilton unable to improve either. Decent job from George Russell, but as they tried to push harder and extract from the car, the performance just wasn't there for so many of the drivers. And I think that's why you didn't really gain that kind of climax to the session in the way that we have seen through the year.
Yeah, it was going to be a tough call for anybody to match him, but with Verstappen not out on track, that's when you get the chance to maybe find something, but in the end no one could match Max Verstappen once again. But of course this was qualifying for Sunday's Grand Prix, and Max Verstappen will start on pole for it. We do it all over again tomorrow for the sprint. We'll have the sprint shootout, qualifying in itself for the sprint race later that afternoon or into the evening in Qatar under the lights, where Max Verstappen will have his first opportunity to seal the title. He just needs to make sure Perez does not outscore him by 6 points. So effectively finishing 6th or higher in the Qatar sprint for Max Verstappen, regardless of where Perez finishes, he will become a 3-time world champion. And race control, car number 4, Norris. Track limits at turn 10, lap time deleted. Norris will not start from the front row of Sunday's Grand Prix. He will start at best in 10th.
Putting George Russell up to the front row for the 3rd time in 2023.
Well, he's waiting to be interviewed, but let's hear from our pole man first, Max Verstappen, who is talking to Naomi Schiff as he just gets ready, towel off, and here they are.
Max, congratulations. It's another pole position for you on this all-important weekend. Is this a step to show what's possible this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, great start, of course, to the weekend. It's quite tricky out there, you know, with the new tarmac. It still needs to rubber in, and very peaky grip. So as soon as you over push it a little bit, like the rear ones step out and stuff. But of course, very happy to be on pole. It's been a good day for us. So yeah.
Obviously, tomorrow is a big day for you. You could already be crowned 3-time world champion tomorrow. So if that does happen, what does this race mean on Sunday to you?
Well, I want to win it, of course. I mean, we put it on pole. Naturally, you want to, of course, win the race. But first of all, of course, let's make sure that tomorrow we have a good day as well. I think the car is quick. Of course, tomorrow, let's say, well, morning, afternoon, however you like it. I think it's going to be again a bit more difficult to get the tires ready to work well with the sand coming onto the track as well. But yeah, it's a great start to the weekend. The car's working well. That's all I could hope for, really.
Well, fantastic. Good luck tomorrow, and enjoy it out there.
Thank you.
George, congratulations. Tough weekend with only one practice session on a track that a lot of the teams don't have a lot of data on. How tricky was it for you out there today?
Yeah, it was a really tricky day for everybody. It was new tarmac, it was really slippery, super windy here, so all the sand is blowing onto the track. And we went out in qualifying, and the lap times were just immense compared to what we were doing this morning. So that was good fun, really happy to be P3. I think this is a bit better than we expected.
Tomorrow we'll have a better idea of what the race pace is going to look like, but looking forward to Sunday, what do you think is going to be possible from where you're starting?
Yeah, I mean, Lando and the McLarens are really quick at the moment. We obviously know Red Bull and Max are in a league of their own, but our fight at the moment is with Ferrari to secure P2 in the Constructors' Championship. We need to be consistent and go from there.
Fantastic. Well, good luck enjoying tomorrow. Where's Lando? Where is he?
We've lost him.
We've lost Lando. Well, thank you, George.
For me or for him? For Lando.
So George Russell is saying, where is Lando? And it's because Lando has now been told to leave because he's not starting on the front row.
I swapped out with the other one. So, third, I'll be honest, not particularly happy with myself. It was a very, very scruffy last lap. So, a bit more on the table. I'll take the top 3.
You've had a fantastic run in the last couple of races, especially with this new package on your car as well. How much are you looking forward to a potential another podium this weekend?
It would be nice, definitely. It's been a very different experience this weekend compared to Suzuka, obviously straight into it today, and very, very slippery track. So it's been a learning curve, definitely, but we'll try our best. We've obviously got another qualifying in the sprint race tomorrow, so hopefully we can have another crack at it, try and do a bit better in quali tomorrow, and have a good Saturday.
We've seen in the past in these sprint format weekends that the teams have obviously one session to lock down their setups for the weekend, and we've seen in Spa, for example, your team didn't make the best call on setup. Are you confident that they've got the right setup for you this weekend?
I'm not sure. I mean, the setup we chose at Spa got a second in the sprint, so it can't have been too bad. But we'll see what we can do. I think obviously the car is how it is. It felt pretty good. I think the track is difficult, and I think the how slippery it is difficult to get used to. So I think it's going to be tricky for everybody.
So I think we're just hearing that you've had a track limits infringement. Is that accurate? Did you know that maybe something was under investigation for your track limits as well?
I didn't know, but this is fun, isn't it?
Oh gosh, it sounds like you may have been dropped down to 6th now. So
wonderful.
It was lovely speaking to you, though, Oscar.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
I'll try
to
again
speak to
tomorrow.
us.
Thank you.
Well done.
Well, chaotic scenes in Parc Ferme as not one but two McLaren drivers lose their lap times, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Lando didn't get the chance to speak to Naomi Schiff. Oscar Piastri did, thought he'd be starting from P3. That now is not the case. And so your top 3, as things stand, Max Verstappen, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. I will say that I don't enjoy a session where things change subsequently. Would you agree, Harry and Alex? I'm sure, Alex, you might have been on the receiving end of these sort of late last-minute decisions.
Me?
Maybe not. Maybe you keep it between the white lines.
I've never been wide of track limits in my life. I'm not even aware of the concept.
Always on the limit, never over.
What's doubly confusing is both McLarens appear to lose their lap in exactly the same corner in exactly the same way, which between the two of them, unfortunately, in fact, Piastri's also off through the exit of turn 5 as well. So yes. When he's having a photo anyway, we can see as one of the top 3. So Lewis Hamilton nowhere to be seen.
We're going to have to get the Photoshop skills out.
But I'm sure when it comes time to park on 3rd position, Lewis Hamilton will be everywhere to be seen.
Yeah, saying that his track limits were at turn 14 for Oscar Piastri. And he said, didn't he, in that interview, a little extra for all of us, a little bonus content, that it was a very scruffy last lap. But he'd take top 3. Unfortunately, he won't get top 3. So we have got an interesting setup for Sunday's Grand Prix. Of course, this was the qualifying session to set the grid for the race on Sunday. So Max Verstappen doing everything he needs to do to take his 3rd world title. Any other standout stars then? Because, of course, the order will shuffle around. And until we have confirmation of where these track violations drop the McLarens down to, I don't want to pin my or nail my colours to the mast of the top 10 just yet. But George Russell getting the better of Lewis Hamilton. Seemed more confident out there than Lewis, who of course was on pole here in 2021 by over half a second. How times have changed. I know we have different cars.
Yeah, but Russell's had a bit of an edge in recent times, and actually since the beginning of this weekend, the beginning of today. I thought Hamilton, he always finds something in qualifying, but on this occasion, Russell able to pip him in that spot. I mean, there's not much between them, about a tenth of a second, if that, between the two Mercedes. Russell will have the advantage on the front row, but Hamilton right behind him as well, and right behind Verstappen. I think some other standouts as well further down the field. I'm being quite impressed by the two Alpines, and for Valtteri Bottas in that Alfa Romeo, squeezing everything he's got out of that car, and they're at the moment, as it currently stands, 7th, 8th and 9th.
When you look at the way Guan Yu Zhou is 20th and last in the other Alfa Romeo, that's a pretty impressive performance, isn't it, from Valtteri Bottas to get that car through to Q3.
I think the big headlines, of course, Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz not making it through to Q3, and Carlos Sainz has come back out of Ferrari hospitality to go and talk to the media. That is a disappointing situation for him, a disappointing situation for Checo Perez, but will give us something to get excited about on Sunday, if indeed the championship is wrapped up in tomorrow's sprint, with Max Verstappen looking likely to be a strong contender to take that come tomorrow evening. Well, guys, Friday is done. It feels a strange one, doesn't it, when we just have that one practice session and then suddenly qualifying, and tomorrow we go straight into the sprint shootout, so it's real pedal to the metal stuff straight away tomorrow. My thanks to the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, racing driver Alex Brundle with us this weekend, and our lead commentator Harry Benjamin. Do join us tomorrow. We'll be on the BBC Sport website 2 o'clock for the sprint shootout, setting the grid for the sprint race, which gets underway at 6:30. Hopefully you'll join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.